Sarah had 48 hours, just 48 hours before she'd be back on the streets. She sat on the threadbare mattress, the thin mattress, of her shelter bed, staring at the eviction notice clutched in her hands. New regulations, it stated. Maximum stay period reached. Time to move on. Move on to where, exactly? She had no job, no references, no identification documents, all of them gone. Lost in the house fire at the Worthington estate. A fire that had destroyed not just her employer's mansion, but her entire life. The homeless shelter was cold, bitterly cold. It was always cold in January, but this winter was the worst anyone could remember. Snow piled high against the windows, and the ancient heating system wheezed and groaned, fighting a losing battle against temperatures that plunged well below freezing every night. Sarah folded the notice carefully, deliberately, and tucked it deep into her coat pocket. She had known this was coming, of course. Shelters weren't meant to be permanent homes. They were waypoints, temporary respites for people who were supposed to be moving towards something better. But Sarah had nowhere better to go. She thought back over the last 3 months, the agonizing last 3 months, about the fire, how it had erupted in the dead of night, spreading with terrifying speed, so fast that she barely escaped with her life. About standing on the sidewalk in her nightgown, watching 10 years of her life, 10 years of hard work, turn to ash. About the Worthington family, the family she had served so faithfully, turning their backs on her the very next day. "We cannot have you here any more," Mrs. Worthington had said, her voice icy despite the lingering smell of smoke. "The insurance investigators will have questions. It's better if you are gone before they arrive." Sarah had tried to explain. She hadn't started the fire. She didn't even know what had caused it. But Mrs. Worthington hadn't wanted to hear explanations. She had wanted someone to blame, and the housekeeper who lived in the servants' quarters was the easiest target. No references, no final paycheck, no offer of help finding new employment. Just a slammed door and a long, humiliating walk to the nearest shelter, with nothing but the clothes on her back. Sarah had tried to rebuild, slowly, meticulously, over these last 3 months. A few donated items, some second-hand clothes, a small bag with her meager possessions, but she hadn't been able to find work. Every interview ended the same way. References. I don't have any. My previous employer. We'll call you. They never called. And now, 48 hours from now, she'd be right back where she started. Worse than where she started. At least 3 months ago it had been autumn. Now it was the dead of winter, and the streets were no place for anyone without a roof over their head. Sarah didn't cry. She had stopped crying weeks ago. Tears didn't solve problems. They didn't find jobs or apartments or meals. They were just water, leaving salt tracks on cheeks that were already dry and cracked from the brutal cold. She stood up and pulled her threadbare coat tighter. It was time for her daily walk to Central Park, the one routine she had stubbornly maintained through everything. Fresh air, movement, a reminder that the world was bigger than this crowded room, full of cots and desperate people. The park was 3 blocks away, a small green space, surrounded by towering buildings. In summer, it was probably beautiful. Now, it was a frozen wasteland of bare trees and snow-covered benches. But Sarah liked it anyway. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was a place where she could pretend, just for a moment, that her life wasn't completely falling apart. She found her usual bench and brushed away the snow. The cold seeped through her thin coat almost immediately, but she sat down anyway. She had nowhere else to be. That was when she heard the crying, a small sound, muffled by the wind, a child's voice, high and frightened. Sarah stood up immediately. Her eyes scanned the park, desperately searching for the source. There, near the fountain, a little girl, maybe 4 years old, standing alone in the snow. Her face was red with tears, and she was turning in circles, looking for someone who wasn't there. Sarah moved without thinking. She crossed the distance in seconds, kneeling down in front of the child. "Hey there," she said softly. "What's wrong? Are you lost?" The little girl nodded, her lip trembling. I can't find my mom." "Okay, that's okay. We're going to find her, together." Sarah kept her voice calm, soothing. "What does your mom look like?" She has brown hair and a blue coat." "Good. That's very helpful. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emily." "That's a beautiful name, Emily." "My name is Sarah. I'm going to stay right here with you until we find your mom. Is that okay?" Emily nodded again. She reached out and grabbed Sarah's hand, holding on tight. Sarah didn't pull away. She scanned the park, looking for anyone who might be searching for a lost child. And there, hurrying along the path, she saw a woman in a blue coat, her face pale with panic. "Emily," the woman called. "Emily, where are you? Mommy!" Emily pulled away from Sarah and ran toward the woman. The mother scooped her up, holding her close, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, thank God," the woman breathed. "Thank God, I only looked away for a second." Sarah stood back, watching the reunion. She felt something warm bloom in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose, usefulness, the simple satisfaction of helping someone who needed help. The mother looked up and saw Sarah standing there. "Did you find her?" the woman asked. "Did you help her?" "She was just a little scared," Sarah said. "I kept her company until you came." The woman rushed over to Sarah and grabbed her hands. Thank you so much. I don't know what I would have done if—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah squeezed her hands gently. "She's safe now," Sarah said. "That's what matters." The mother nodded, still tearful. She pulled Emily closer and walked away, looking back once to wave at Sarah before disappearing around the corner. Sarah watched them go. Then she returned to her bench and sat down again. She didn't know that someone else had been watching, someone who had seen the entire scene unfold from the shadows of the nearby buildings, someone who had been searching for exactly this kind of person for a very long time. The next day, Sarah was packing her small bag when the shelter manager came to find her. "Sarah, there's someone here to see you." Sarah looked up, surprised. No one ever came to see her. She had no family left, no friends who even knew where she was, who could possibly be asking for her. She followed the manager to the front room, where visitors were allowed, and there, standing by the window, was a man she had never seen before. He was tall, very tall, with broad shoulders and an imposing presence that seemed to fill the entire room. His hair was dark brown, almost black, swept back from a face that was striking in its severity. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes that were the most unusual color Sarah had ever seen. Amber, shot through with gold, like liquid fire, captured in glass. He was wearing a bespoke suit, probably costing more than Sarah had earned in a year working for Mrs. Worthington. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his expression was completely unreadable. Sarah stopped in the doorway, uncertain. This man reeked of money, power, the kind of person who probably never set foot in a homeless shelter in his entire life. "Miss Santos?" he asked. His voice was deep, rich, with an accent she couldn't quite place. "Maybe European." "Yes." Sarah's voice was cautious. "Can I help you?" The man studied her for a long moment. Those golden eyes seemed to see right through her, examining her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "My name is Cale Dragonheart," he said finally, "and I have a proposition for you." Sarah blinked. "A proposition? I saw what you did yesterday, Cale continued, in Central Park. The way you helped that lost child, the way you calmed her, kept her safe until her mum found her. Sarah felt a flush of confusion. You were watching me. I have been watching you for 3 days, Kyle admitted. I needed to be sure. Sure of what? Sure that you are the person I need. Sarah took a step back. This was strange. Too strange. Men did not watch homeless women for days and then show up with propositions. At least, not with any propositions she wanted to hear. I think you should leave, she said carefully. Kyle held up a hand. Please, hear me out. I know this must seem unusual. But I am desperate, Miss Santos, and I believe you are exactly what I have been looking for. Sarah hesitated. There was something in his voice, something raw, something that sounded like genuine pain beneath the polished exterior, against her better judgment. She stayed. I have 2 sons, Kyle said, twins. They are 5 years old. Their mum died 2 years ago, and they have not been the same since. He paused, his jaw tightening. Ethan has nightmares every night. Liam hasn't spoken a single word since the day of the funeral. Sarah felt her heart clench. Those poor boys. I have hired 47 nannies, Kyle continued. 47. Not one of them has lasted more than a month. My sons reject everyone. They push away anyone who tries to get close, and I... He stopped, looking away. I do not know what to do anymore. I'm sorry, Sarah said softly, but I do not understand what this has to do with me. Kyle turned back to her. Those golden eyes were intense, burning with something that might have been hope. I watched you with that little girl, he said. You didn't rush her. You didn't grab her or force her to calm down. You got down on her level. You spoke softly. You let her come to you, and in less than a minute she was holding your hand like you were her best friend. Sarah shrugged. She was scared. I just wanted to help. Exactly. Kyle stepped closer. That is exactly what I need. Someone who helps because they want to, not because they are being paid. Someone who knows how to reach frightened children. Someone like you. Sarah shook her head. Even if I wanted to help, I'm not qualified to be a nanny. I do not have any training. You have something better than training, Cale interrupted. You have instinct. You have compassion. You have a gift that cannot be taught. Sarah didn't know what to say. This was all happening too fast. Yesterday she had been dreading the streets. Today a stranger was offering her... What? Exactly? What are you proposing? She asked carefully. Kyle took a deep breath. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A photograph. He held it out to Sarah, and despite herself, she took it. 2 little boys stared back at her, identical twins with dark hair and golden amber eyes, just like their fathers. They were sitting side by side on a huge sofa, dressed in expensive clothes that seemed too formal for children their age. But it was their expressions that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. They looked so sad, so empty, like 2 candles that had been blown out, leaving nothing but smoke behind. Ethan and Liam, Kyle said quietly. They used to be the happiest children you ever saw, always laughing, always getting into trouble. Now Ethan screams in his sleep, and Liam stares at walls for hours without moving. Sarah could not look away from those eyes, those sad, hollow eyes that seemed to be pleading for something they could not name. I need a mother for my sons, Kyle said, and you need shelter. Sarah looked up sharply. What? I know your situation, Miss Santos. I know you have 48 hours before you are back on the streets. I know you have no job, no references, no prospects. How do you know all that? I told you. I have been watching. Kyle's voice was calm, matter of fact. I am offering you a solution, a home, stability, everything you need. Sarah felt dizzy. In exchange for what? Kyle met her eyes. Marriage. The word hung in the air between them. Sarah was certain she had misheard. I am sorry. Did you say marriage? I did. Kyle did not blink. I'm proposing a legal union. You would become my wife, at least on paper. You would live in my home, care for my children, and be provided for completely. In return, you would give my sons what they desperately need, a mother. Sarah laughed. She could not help it. The whole situation was so absurd, so completely unbelievable. That laughter was the only possible response. You are insane, she said. Perhaps. Kyle did not seem offended. But I am also serious. You want to marry a homeless woman you just met so she can take care of your kids. I want to give my children a chance at happiness, Kyle corrected, and in 3 days of observation, you are the first person I have seen who might actually be able to provide that. Sarah shook her head. This is crazy. I do not know you. I do not know your children. I do not even know if you are who you say you are. All valid concerns, Kyle acknowledged, which is why I'm not asking for an answer right now. I'm asking for a chance. Come to my home. Meet Ethan and Liam. See if you feel anything, any connection at all. And then decide. Sarah looked down at the photograph again, at those 2 little boys with their haunted eyes. She thought about the notice in her pocket. 48 hours. She thought about the cold streets waiting for her outside these walls, and she thought about what kind of person she wanted to be. The kind who played it safe and ended up frozen on a park bench, or the kind who took risks, even crazy ones, for a chance at something better. One visit, she said slowly. I will come and meet your sons, but I am not promising anything. Kyle's expression did not change, but something in his eyes shifted. Relief, maybe, or hope. That is all I ask, he said. He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to her. This is my address. My driver will pick you up tomorrow morning at 9. Bring your things. Sarah took the card. The address was in the very wealthy part of the city, the area she had only seen from bus windows, far from homeless shelters and soup kitchens and all the hard realities of her current life. What if I say no? She asked, after meeting them. What if I decide this is not for me? Then you leave with my gratitude and a reference good enough to get you any job you want, Kyle said. I'm not trying to trap you, Miss Santos. I'm trying to save my children. And I believe you might be the only person who can help me do that. He turned to leave, but Sarah stopped him with one more question. Why marriage? She asked. Why not just hire me as a nanny, like all the others? Guy, Kyle paused at the door. He was silent for a moment, as if considering how much to tell her. Because nannies leave, he said finally. They have other jobs, other opportunities, other lives. My sons have lost too many people already. They need someone who will stay, someone who is family. And a legal wife cannot leave. A legal wife has a reason to try. Kyle looked back at her. I am not offering you love, Miss Santos. I am not sure I have any left to give, but I am offering you security, stability, and a place to belong. For some people, that is enough. He walked out before Sarah could respond. She stood in the empty room for a long time, holding the photograph in one hand and the address card in the other. Two little boys with sad eyes, a man with a desperate request, and 48 hours standing between her and oblivion. Sarah looked at the photograph one more time. Then she went to pack her bag. The next morning came faster than Sarah expected. She had barely slept, her mind racing with questions and doubts, and a strange, fluttering hope she did not quite trust. At exactly 9 o'clock, a black car pulled up in front of the shelter. Not just any car, a limousine, sleek and expensive, looking impossibly out of place on the worn street. Sarah picked up her bag. A single small duffel that contained everything she owned in the world, and walked out to meet her fate. The driver was an older man, with a kind face and a formal uniform. He opened the door for her without a word, treating her with the same respect he might have shown a queen. Sarah slid into the leather seat and tried not to stare at the interior. She had never been in a car this nice. It probably cost more than the house she had grown up in, back in Ohio. The drive took nearly an hour, winding through neighborhoods that grew progressively wealthier as they went. Sarah watched through the tinted windows as the city transformed. Cramped apartments gave way to townhouses. Townhouses to mansions. Mansions to estates hidden behind iron gates and tall hedges. Finally, the car turned onto a private drive. Trees lined both sides, bare in winter but clearly magnificent in other seasons. At the end of the drive stood the largest house Sarah had ever seen. No, not a house, a palace. It was built of grey stone, 3 stories tall, with towers at each corner and windows that glittered like diamonds in the morning sun. Ivy climbed the walls in elegant patterns, and a fountain dominated the circular drive, frozen now, but still beautiful. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. What had she gotten herself into? The driver opened her door. "Welcome to Dragonheart Manor, Miss Santos." Sarah stepped out of the car, clutching her worn bag like a lifeline. She felt small, ridiculous, a pauper at the gates of a kingdom. But she had come this far. She was not going to turn back now. The front door opened before she could reach it. Kyle stood there, dressed more casually than yesterday but still impossibly elegant. Dark trousers, a white shirt open at the collar. In the morning light, she could see something she had missed before, along the side of his neck, just visible above his collar. His skin seemed to shimmer, not quite scales, but something close. A pattern that caught the light and glittered gold, before disappearing when he turned his head. Sarah blinked, and it was gone. A trick of the light, she told herself. Nothing more. "You came," Kyle said. There was no surprise in his voice, but his shoulders seemed to relax slightly. "I said I would." He nodded and stepped aside. "Then welcome to my home. The boys are waiting." Sarah walked through the door and into another world. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, paintings that looked old enough and valuable enough to belong in a museum. It was beautiful, but it was also cold, formal. Not the kind of place where children played and laughed and made messes. Sarah thought of the photograph. The 2 sad boys in their too formal clothes. She was beginning to understand why they might be so unhappy. Kyle led her through a maze of hallways and rooms until they reached a door that looked slightly different from the others. Less formal. More worn around the edges, as if it was actually used. "The nursery," Kyle explained. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. "I should warn you, Leo can be difficult. He may not acknowledge your presence at all, and Lucas might ask you hundreds of questions. He uses words as shields." Sarah nodded. "I understand." "Do you?" Kyle looked at her with those golden eyes. "My sons have rejected every woman I have brought into this house. They have thrown tantrums, started fires. One of them bit a nanny so hard she needed stitches." Sarah looked at the door. She thought about the little girl in Central Park, about fear and loss, and the desperate need to protect oneself from more pain. "They are scared," she said quietly. "That is all. Just scared." Kyle stared at her for a long moment. Then he opened the door. The nursery was a large room filled with toys that looked expensive and barely touched. 2 beds sat against opposite walls, covered in blankets that probably cost more than Sarah's entire wardrobe. And there, in the center of the room, were the twins. They were even more striking in person than in the photograph, identical in every way, from their dark hair to their golden eyes, to the shape of their small faces. They were playing with blocks, or at least, one of them was playing while the other sat motionless, staring at nothing. "Lucas, Leo," Kyle said. "This is Miss Sarah. She's going to be spending some time with us." The active twin, Lucas, looked up immediately. His eyes were sharp, assessing, far too old for his young face. "Another nanny?" he asked. His voice was flat, unimpressed. "She will not last either." Sarah did not flinch. She knelt down, bringing herself to his level, just as she had with the little girl in Central Park. "I am not a nanny," she said calmly. "I am just visiting. Your father thought we might like to meet each other." Lucas narrowed his eyes. "Why?" "Because I'm good at playing," Sarah said simply, "and I thought you might be good at it too." Lucas looked suspicious. "What kind of playing?" Sarah glanced around the room. All this expensive equipment, all these elaborate toys, and 2 little boys who looked like they'd forgotten what fun was. "What kind do you like?" she asked. Lucas opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out. He looked confused and as if no one had ever asked him that before. Sarah waited. She did not push. She did not suggest. She just waited. Finally, Lucas said, "I like making things. But the blocks here are boring." "Show me," Sarah said. Lucas hesitated. Then, slowly, he picked up one of the blocks and held it out to her. It was made of some kind of polished wood, perfectly smooth, perfectly uniform. Sarah took it, turned it over in her hands. "You're right," she said. "These are boring." She set it down on the floor. "What if we built something different?" "Like what?" "Like..." Sarah looked around. Her eyes landed on a stack of books in the corner. "Like a castle, out of books, and blankets, and whatever else we can find." Lucas's eyes widened slightly. "That's against the rules." "Whose rules?" "The au pair's rules." Sarah smiled. "Good thing I'm not an au pair then." For a long moment, Lucas just stared at her. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Okay," he said. "Let's build a castle." They spent the next hour constructing an elaborate fortress. Out of books, pillows, blankets, and anything else they could find. Sarah let Lucas take the lead, following his instructions, helping when asked, suggesting ideas when he got stuck. She was so focused on Lucas that she almost didn't notice when Leo moved, but Kyle noticed. He was still standing by the door, watching, and his sharp intake of breath drew Sarah's attention. Leo had risen from his spot in the corner, slowly, silently. He was crossing the room, toward where Sarah and Lucas were working. Sarah didn't look directly at him, didn't acknowledge his approach. She kept building, kept talking to Lucas, acting as if nothing unusual was happening. Leo stopped about 3 feet away, close enough to watch, far enough to run, if he needed to. Sarah picked up a pillow and held it out toward Lucas. "We need something for the tower," she said casually. "What do you think?" Lucas took the pillow. Then he looked at his brother. "Leo can help," he said. "He's good at towers." Sarah nodded, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. She picked up another pillow and set it on the floor between herself and Leo. Then she went back to building, leaving the pillow there, an invitation, not a demand. The minutes stretched. Sarah built, Lucas directed, and Leo stood watching, his small face unreadable. Then, so slowly, Sarah might have imagined it. Leo reached down and picked up the pillow. He didn't look at Sarah, didn't speak, but he placed the pillow carefully on top of the tower. Lucas was building. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, keeping her face neutral. "Perfect," Lucas said. "Now we need a flag." Leo turned and walked to the corner. He picked up a small blanket and brought it back, still without a word. He handed it to his brother. Lucas took it and looked at Leo with an expression that broke Sarah's heart. Hope. Desperate. Fragile hope. "Thanks." "Leo," he whispered. Leo did not respond, but he sat down next to the castle and started helping to build. By the door, Kyle made a sound. Sarah couldn't interpret. When she glanced back at him, his eyes were suspiciously bright. She turned back to the boys and kept building. When the castle was finished, Lucas declared it the greatest fortress ever constructed. Leo didn't say anything, but he touched the blanket flag with gentle fingers, his expression almost peaceful. "Miss Sarah," Lucas said suddenly, "are you going to leave like all the others?" Sarah hesitated. She looked at these 2 boys, so broken and so brave. She looked at their castle of books and pillows. She thought about the streets, waiting for her outside, the cold future. She was trying to escape, and she thought about what it would mean to stay. "I don't know," she said honestly. "That depends on a lot of things." "Like what?" "Like whether your father and I can work something out, and like whether you and Leo want me here." Lucas looked at his brother. Leo didn't speak, but he moved slightly closer to Sarah, not touching, just closer. "I think we do," Lucas said quietly. "Want you here. I mean..." Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a door opening, a decision being made. She looked back at Kyle, still standing by the door, watching them, with those golden eyes, full of hope and fear and desperate longing. "Can we talk?" she asked him. "Privately." Kyle nodded. He glanced at the boys. "Stay here. I'll be back soon." Lucas nodded seriously, as if he understood the gravity of the moment. Leo just kept touching the blanket flag, lost in his own world. Sarah stood and followed Cale out of the room. They walked in silence to a study at the end of the hall. It was a beautiful room, all dark wood and leather furniture. But Sarah barely noticed. Her mind was racing. Cale closed the door behind them and turned to face her. "That was remarkable," he said. "What you did in there. Leo hasn't voluntarily approached anyone in 2 years." Sarah nodded slowly. "They're good boys, just hurting." "Yes." Kyle's voice was rough. "They are." There was a long silence. Then Sarah took a deep breath and asked the question that had been burning in her mind since she walked through the door. "What exactly would this arrangement involve?" she asked. "This marriage you proposed. What would be expected of me?" Kyle considered the question carefully before answering. "You would be their mother. In every practical sense," he said. "You would live here, care for them, help them heal, or in exchange, you would have access to all the resources of this household, money, clothes, whatever you need, you would want for nothing." "And you?" Sarah asked. "What would our relationship be?" Kyle's expression was unreadable. "I would be your husband, in name. We would share a home, but not—" He hesitated. "Not a bedroom, not that kind of intimacy. This would be an arrangement of convenience, not romance." Sarah felt something. That might have been relief, or might have been disappointment. She wasn't sure which. "So, we'd be partners," she said. "Nothing more." "Partners." Kyle nodded. "Two people with a common goal, healing my children." Sarah thought about it, about the boys in the other room, about the homeless shelter, waiting for her, if she said no, about the life she could have here, even if it wasn't the life she had once dreamed of. "I have conditions," she said. "Name them," Sarah stated, her voice firm but gentle. "First," Sarah began, "I need to know the truth, the whole truth, about your family, about what happened to your wife, Emily, about anything that might affect Leo and Lucas." Kyle was silent, a deep, thoughtful silence. Then he nodded, a barely perceptible movement. "Fair," he conceded. "You will have the full truth, Sarah. I promise you that." "Second," Sarah continued, her gaze unwavering, "I will not be treated like hired help. If I'm going to be their mom, I need to be treated like a member of this family, not a member of the staff." "You would be my wife, Sarah," Kyle replied, his voice resonating with sincerity. "My equal in all things." Third, Sarah met his eyes squarely, her resolve crystal clear. "I need you to be honest about what you can and cannot give. If you cannot love me, fine. I'm not asking for love, Cale, but I need respect. I need honesty. I need to know that I can trust you." Kyle held her gaze, his own eyes filled with an intensity that spoke volumes. "You have my word," he affirmed. Sarah nodded slowly, deliberately. "Then I have one more question, Cale." "Ask it," he urged, his voice soft. "Why me?" Sarah spread her hands, a gesture of genuine bewilderment. "Really? Kyle, there must be thousands of women who would jump at the chance to marry a man like you. Wealthy, powerful, with a beautiful home and adorable children. Why choose a woman from a homeless shelter? Someone with nothing to offer?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to the window, looking out at the frost-covered gardens beyond. "My wife, Emily," he said finally, his voice tinged with a palpable sadness, "was the love of my life. When she died, a part of me died with her. I've spent the last 2 years watching my sons suffer, and I've been powerless to help them. Nothing I do reaches them. No one I hire can break through their walls." He turned back to Sarah, his expression earnest. "But you did, Sarah," he said, his voice filled with a hint of wonder. "In 1 hour, you accomplished what 47 professionals could not. You reached Leo. You made Lucas smile. You built a castle out of books and made my children happy for the first time in 2 years. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the depth of his emotion. "I don't care about wealth or status or pedigree," he continued, his words ringing with conviction. "I care about my sons, and you are the first person who has given me hope that they might actually be okay." Sarah felt tears threatening again, that familiar sting behind her eyes. She blinked them back, steeling herself against the emotion. "You barely know me, Kyle," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know enough." Kyle's eyes were intense, unwavering. "I know that you are kind, that you are patient, that you see frightened children as children, not problems to be solved. I know that when you had nothing, you still stopped to help a lost little girl in Central Park. And I know that my sons need someone exactly like you." Sarah stood there, in this beautiful room, in this impossible situation, and tried to make sense of everything that was happening. 48 hours ago, she had been preparing to live on the streets, bracing herself for another harsh January. Now she was being offered a home, a family, a purpose. All she had to do was marry a stranger. She thought about Lucas and Leo, about their sad eyes and their broken hearts, about the way Leo had picked up that pillow and joined them, taking his first step back toward the world of the living. She thought about herself, about the years of service that had ended in betrayal, about the loneliness that had defined her life for so long. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to belong somewhere, and she made her decision. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and resolute. Kyle went still, his breath catching in his throat. "Yes," he repeated, barely a whisper. "Yes," Sarah nodded, her gaze locking with his. "I will marry you, Kyle. I will be a mother to your sons. I will try to help them heal." Kyle closed his eyes for a moment, a wave of emotion washing over his face. When he opened them, there was moisture there, a glistening that he didn't bother to hide. "Thank you," he breathed, his voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you, Sarah." Sarah held up a hand, a gesture of caution. "But we take this slowly, Kyle. The marriage can happen whenever you want, but I need time to build a relationship with Lucas and Leo before anything becomes permanent. I will not make promises to children I might not be able to keep." "Whatever you need, Sarah," Kyle said, his voice filled with sincerity. "However long it takes. I am just grateful you are willing to try." Sarah looked at this man, this stranger, who was about to become her husband. She wondered what she was getting herself into, what challenges lay ahead. She wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. But then she thought about those 2 little boys and their haunted eyes, and the glimmer of hope she had seen in them, and she knew, deep in her heart, that some risks were worth taking. "When do we start?" she asked, a hint of anticipation in her voice. Kyle smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face from severe to almost handsome. "Right now," he said, his eyes twinkling with warmth. If you're ready, Sarah. Sarah was ready. The wedding happened 3 days later. It was nothing like Sarah had ever imagined her wedding would be, back when she still allowed herself to imagine such things. No white dress, no flowers, no guests except the official witnesses and the twins, who stood solemnly by their father's side. Just a small office in the city courthouse, stark and impersonal, a few signatures on official documents. A simple silver band that Cale slid onto her finger with hands that were surprisingly gentle. "This ring is temporary, Sarah," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "When you're ready to choose something permanent, you can pick whatever you want." Sarah looked at the simple band, its unadorned surface gleaming softly. It wasn't flashy or expensive, certainly not like the surroundings she was moving into, but it was real, solid, a promise made visible. "I like this one, Cale," she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. Cale looked surprised, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. "You don't have to keep it, Sarah. I can afford much more." "I know." Sarah smiled slightly, a gentle curve of her lips. "But this ring represents the day my life started over. I don't think I want to replace that." Something shifted in Cale's expression. Something soft and wondering. That made Sarah's heart skip a beat, but before she could examine that feeling too closely, Lucas tugged on her sleeve. "Does this mean you're our mom now?" he asked, his golden eyes wide and serious. Sarah knelt down to his level, meeting his gaze directly. "It means I'm going to try to be, Lucas," she said honestly, "if you want me to." Lucas looked at Leo, who was standing slightly apart, watching them with his usual unreadable expression. "We want you to, Sarah," Lucas said, his voice filled with hope. "Both of us." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, that familiar sting of emotion. She reached out and gently touched Leo's hand. He didn't pull away. A small but significant victory. "Then I will do my best," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I promise." Moving into Dragonheart Manor was overwhelming. A sensory overload. Sarah had grown up poor, worked as a maid her entire adult life, and had spent the last 3 months in a homeless shelter. She was not prepared for the sheer scale of her new home, or the opulence that surrounded her. Her room alone was larger than the entire apartment she had grown up in. The bed could have fit 4 people comfortably. The closet was the size of a small bedroom, already filled with clothes in her exact size, that Cale had somehow procured between the proposal and the wedding. "I didn't know what style you preferred, Sarah," he said when she discovered them, a hint of apology in his voice. "So I purchased a variety. Return anything you don't like." Sarah ran her fingers over silk and cashmere, over fabrics she had only ever touched while doing laundry for her employers. Expensive materials she had never dreamed of owning. "This is too much, Cale," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "It's appropriate for your station, Sarah," Cale said, his voice firm but gentle. "You are Lady Dragonheart now. You should dress accordingly." Lady Dragonheart. The name felt strange, foreign, like a costume she was trying on for size, a role she wasn't sure she could play. But when she looked in the mirror, wearing one of the new dresses for the first time, something shifted. She looked different, not just the clothes, but something in her eyes. She looked like someone who mattered. Maybe she could get used to this, and after all, the first few weeks were a learning curve. Sarah had to figure out the household, which ran like a well-oiled machine, thanks to a staff of servants who regarded her with varying degrees of suspicion. She had to learn the geography of the enormous house, which had more rooms than she could count, and at least 3 staircases. She had to navigate her strange new relationship with Kyle, who was unfailingly polite, but kept a careful distance, as if afraid to cross some invisible line. But mostly, she focused on the boys. Lucas was the easier of the two, in some ways. He talked constantly, a stream of questions and observations and random facts that never seemed to stop. At first, Sarah thought he was just naturally chatty, but as the days passed, she realized the truth. Lucas talked because silence scared him. Silence meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. His mother's death, his brother's withdrawal, the parade of nannies who came and went. Each one another proof that people always left. So Sarah let him talk. She answered his questions, no matter how random. She encouraged his observations, and slowly, carefully, she started to teach him that some silences were okay, that not every quiet moment was a threat. They would sit in Central Park, bundled up against the cold, and Sarah would say, "Let us see how long we can listen to the birds," bow without talking. At first, Lucas could barely last 30 seconds, but over time, he got better. A minute, 2 minutes, 5. "I didn't know birds made so many different sounds," he said one day, his voice full of wonder. Sarah smiled. "Amazing what you hear when you stop to listen." Leo was more challenging. He still didn't speak. He still spent most of his time in his own silent world. But Sarah had noticed something. He watched. He listened. He paid attention to everything around him, with an intensity that was almost unsettling for a 5-year-old. So Sarah started communicating with him differently. She would draw pictures and leave them where he could find them. She would play music and watch his reactions. She would sit near him, not too close, and do her own quiet activities, letting him know she was there, without demanding anything. One day, about a month after the I-do's, Sarah was in the nursery, folding some of the boys' clothes. Leo was in his usual spot by the window, staring out at the snow. Sarah started humming. It was an old song, one her mum used to sing to her as a child, a lullaby about stars and dreams and safe places. She wasn't thinking about Leo. She was just humming to herself, lost in memories. But then she noticed that Leo had turned from the window. He was watching her, his golden eyes fixed on her face, with an expression she had never seen before. Sarah kept humming, kept folding, didn't react. Leo stood up and walked toward her, slowly, carefully, like a wild animal approaching something it wasn't sure about. Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her movements calm, kept her voice steady. The song continued, soft and gentle. In the quiet room, Leo stopped right next to her. He was so close. She could feel the warmth of him, this little boy who had been so cold and distant for so long. Then, in a voice so quiet she almost missed it, Leo said his first word in 2 years, "Mom." Sarah stopped humming. Her hands went still, her eyes filled with tears that she couldn't stop. Leo looked up at her, his own eyes bright with something that might have been hope. "Song," he whispered. "Mom's song." Sarah understood, somehow, impossibly. Leo remembered this lullaby. Maybe his mother had sung something similar. Maybe the melody had touched some deep memory that words couldn't reach. She dropped the clothes and knelt down. Opening her arms, she didn't expect Leo to come to her. He had barely tolerated physical contact since she arrived. But he did. He walked into her arms and let her hold him, his small body trembling against hers. Sarah held him and cried. She couldn't help it. 2 years of silence. 2 years of this child locked away in his own grief. And a simple song had been the key. "I'm here," she whispered into his hair. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Leo didn't answer, but he held on tighter. That was how Kyle found them 20 minutes later. Sarah sitting on the floor of the nursery. Leo curled in her lap. Both of them quiet and still. Kyle stood in the doorway. Frozen. His face was pale, his eyes wide. "He spoke," Kyle said. His voice cracked. "The staff told me. They said he said something." Sarah looked up at him, tears still wet on her cheeks. "He called me Mom," she said, "and he asked me to keep singing." Kyle crossed the room in 3 long strides. He dropped to his knees beside them, his hand reaching out to touch Leo's back, as if he couldn't quite believe this was real. "Leo," he said softly. "Son." Leo turned his head slightly. He looked at his father with those golden eyes, so like Cale's own. "Dad," he whispered. Cale made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He gathered both of them into his arms, holding them like they were the most precious things in the world. 2 years, he said, his voice rough. 2 years I've been waiting to hear his voice again. Sarah didn't know what to say, so she just held on, letting Kyle's arms encircle her and Leo both, feeling something shift between them that she couldn't quite name. When Kyle finally pulled back, his eyes were red, but he was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since she had met him. "How did you do it?" he asked. "What was different?" "I sang," Sarah said simply. "A song my mom used to sing to me. I think maybe his mother sang something similar." Kyle's expression flickered with pain. "She did," he said quietly. "Every night. It was her favorite lullaby." Sarah nodded slowly. He remembered. Somewhere inside. He remembered her. And hearing the song brought that memory back. Kyle looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You are extraordinary," he said. "Do you know that? You have done in 1 month what dozens of professionals couldn't do in 2 years. "I just listened," Sarah said, "and I waited. That's all anyone really needs sometimes." Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. "I made a business arrangement with you," he said. "A marriage of convenience, no emotions, no complications." "Yes," Sarah said carefully. "That was the agreement." "I think," Kyle said slowly, "that I may have underestimated what would happen when I brought you into this house." Sarah's heart was beating fast. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, a knot forming in her stomach. Kyle hesitated, then continued. "I mean, watching you with my sons. I've never seen anyone love them the way you do." He shook his head, a hint of wonder in his eyes. "And I find myself feeling things I didn't expect to feel." "Kyle," Sarah began, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly, holding up a hand. "Our arrangement, and it still stands. I just wanted you to know that you've become more than just a solution to me, Sarah." He paused, searching for the right word. "Important. Sarah stared at this man who had hired her to be a mother, and who had somehow become something more to her as well. She thought about their agreement, the boundaries they had so carefully defined, and she thought about how quickly those boundaries were starting to blur, like watercolors bleeding into each other before she could respond. A whirlwind named Lucas came bursting into the room. "Dad! Sarah!" He skidded to a stop, his eyes wide with excitement. "Did Leo really talk? The staff said he talked. Is it true?" "It is true, Lucas," Kyle said, turning to include his elder son in the moment. "Your brother said 2 words. Lucas spun around to face Leo, who was still nestled in Sarah's lap. "Leo!" he shouted, barely containing his joy. "You talked! Say something else! Say my name!" Leo looked at his brother, his expression uncertain. For a moment, Sarah feared he might retreat back into his shell, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. But then, very quietly, he said, "Lucas!" Lucas burst into tears, but these were tears of pure joy. He threw himself at his brother, wrapping him in a hug so tight they both tumbled onto the floor. "I knew you could do it," Lucas sobbed, his voice thick with emotion. "I knew you were still in there. I missed you so much." Leo hugged him back, his small arms encircling his twin. "Missed you too," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah and Cale exchanged a look over the boys' heads. Something unspoken, a silent acknowledgement of the moment, passed between them. A shared joy, a connection that went far beyond their carefully constructed arrangement. This, Sarah thought, her heart swelling, this is what family feels like. She had almost forgotten. The warmth, the connection, the unconditional love. The weeks that followed unfolded like a dream, a beautiful tapestry woven with threads of hope and healing. Leo didn't suddenly transform into a chatterbox. He remained quiet, cautious, still prone to retreating into himself when overwhelmed. But he spoke now. A few words here, a complete sentence there, each one a precious gift that Sarah treasured. Lucas, meanwhile, began to change as well. He still talked a lot. It was part of his personality. But the desperate, almost frantic edge was gone from his voice. He no longer needed words to fill every silence. He could simply be present, content. And Sarah found herself settling into her new life in ways she hadn't anticipated. She was building a home, a life, a family. She learned the routines of the household, mastering the intricacies of the Worthington estate. She befriended the staff, who gradually warmed to her as they witnessed her genuine love and care for the boys. She explored the vast grounds, discovering hidden gardens, sprawling greenhouses filled with exotic plants, and a small, secluded pond that promised to be breathtaking in the spring. She also learned more about Cale, peeling back the layers of his guarded exterior. He wasn't what she had initially expected. Not cold, not cruel, not distant, just guarded, like someone who had been hurt so deeply that he had built impenetrable walls around himself, determined to prevent any future pain. But the walls were starting to crack, ever so slightly. Sarah saw it in the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she wasn't paying attention. She saw it in the way his hand would linger on hers, just a fraction longer than necessary. When they sat together in the evenings, she saw it in the way his eyes would soften when he watched her with the boys. But she also saw things that confused her. Things that she couldn't quite explain. The faint shimmer on his neck that appeared and disappeared in certain light. the strange heat that seemed to radiate from him sometimes, as if he was perpetually running a low-grade fever that never quite broke, the way his eyes seemed to glow in certain lights, shifting from amber to something more golden, something other. And there were other things, strange things that didn't quite fit, like the way the staff seemed almost afraid of him at times, walking on eggshells around him, like the way certain rooms in the house were always locked, off limits, like the way Kyle would sometimes disappear for hours, returning with no explanation and a look on his face that discouraged any questions. Sarah didn't pry. She had made a bargain. And part of that bargain was accepting that she wouldn't know everything about her new husband's life, that there would be secrets, unspoken truths, but she was curious, increasingly so, and she was starting to care enough, to want to know, to understand the man behind the walls, the truth, or at least a glimpse of it. Came out on a night about 6 weeks after the wedding. Sarah was walking down a hallway she rarely used, searching for a book she had misplaced in one of the sitting rooms. The house was unusually quiet. The boys were asleep, nestled in their beds. Most of the staff had retired for the night, seeking their own rest. She heard voices, muffled voices, coming from behind a closed door. Kyle's voice. She recognized that instantly. And another voice. A female voice that was unfamiliar, without thinking. Sarah moved closer to the door. She didn't intend to eavesdrop. She just wanted to know who was visiting at such a late hour. Who Kyle was meeting in secret. "You cannot keep doing this," the female voice was saying, her tone sharp and insistent. "Sooner or later, someone will find out. And when they do—" "They won't find out," Kyle replied, his voice low but firm. "I've been careful." "Careful isn't enough." The woman's voice was cold, imperious. "She's human, Kyle. She has no place in our world. You should have chosen one of your own kind, not some homeless waif you picked up off the street." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Our world. Your own kind. What did that even mean? "She's my wife," Kyle said, and there was an unmistakable edge of steel in his voice. "And she will be treated with respect, Morgana. I don't care what you think about humans. Sarah is family now." A brittle, humorless laugh echoed from behind the door. "Family? She doesn't even know what you are. What will happen when she finds out, when she sees you? For what you really are. That's my concern, not yours," Kyle snapped. The door suddenly swung open, with unexpected force. Sarah stumbled back, caught off guard. But it was too late. She had been discovered. A woman stood in the doorway, blocking her path, tall, elegant, with striking features that bore an eerie resemblance to Cale's. The same high cheekbones, and the same strong jawline, the same, almost severe expression. But her eyes were different. Ice blue instead of amber, and cold. So cold they seemed to suck the warmth out of the room. "Well, well," the woman said, her lips curving into a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. "The little human bride? Listening at doors, are we?" Sarah straightened her spine, fighting to maintain her composure. "I wasn't listening. I was looking for a book." "Of course you were." The woman's eyes swept over Sarah dismissively, as if she were nothing more than a speck of dust. "I'm Morgana, Kyle's sister, and you are the stray he brought home to play mother." "Morgana." Kyle appeared behind his sister, his face tight with barely suppressed anger. "That's enough. I'm simply stating facts, brother." Morgana didn't take her eyes off Sarah. Does she know? Does she know what she married? Sarah looked from one to the other, her mind racing. She should have been afraid. She should have been confused and overwhelmed. But something inside her, something deep down, clicked into place. All the strange things she had noticed, all the little pieces that hadn't quite fit, suddenly began to make a terrifying kind of sense. "What are you?" she asked quietly, her voice surprisingly steady. Kyle's face drained of color. "Sarah, she deserves to know," Morgana said, a cruel glint in her eyes, "before she runs screaming from this house." I'm not going to run," Sarah said, and surprised by the unwavering resolve in her own voice. "I made a promise to those boys upstairs, and I intend to keep it. I'm not going anywhere. But I want the truth. All of it." A long, heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the faint ticking of a grandfather clock in the distance. Then Kyle stepped forward, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. "Come with me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something I need to show you." He led her to a part of the house she had never been to before, down a winding staircase she had never noticed, hidden behind a tapestry, through doors that opened only when Kyle touched them. Responding to some unseen force, finally, they emerged into a room that took Sarah's breath away. It was a cavern, a vast underground space, lit by torches that burned with strange blue flames. The walls were covered with carvings. Dragons, hundreds of dragons, some in flight, some breathing fire, some curled around treasure hoards, and in the center of the room, displayed on a pedestal, was a sword. No, not a sword, a dragon's fang, polished and sharpened, as long as Sarah was tall. "This is the heart of Dragonheart Manor," Kyle said quietly. "The legacy of my family." Sarah turned to look at him, and in the blue firelight, she saw him clearly for the first time. The shimmer on his neck was not a trick of the light. They were scales, real scales, golden and gleaming, spreading from his collar down beneath his shirt. His eyes were glowing, not amber, gold, liquid, molten gold, like fire trapped in glass. And his hands, his left hand was still human, but his right hand had changed. The fingers were longer, tipped with claws. The skin was covered in golden scales. "I am a dragon," Kyle said. His voice was steady, but there was fear in his eyes. Fear of her reaction, fear of losing her. "My family has ruled these lands for 1,000 years. We can take human form, live among your kind. But we are not human. We are something else, entirely." Sarah stared at him, at the scales, at the claws, at the man who was not a man at all. She should have been terrified. She should have run screaming, just like Morgana had predicted. But she thought about Lucas and Leo, about their golden eyes that matched their father's, about the strange heat they radiated, the way they sometimes seemed to move faster than children should. "They are dragons too," she said. It was not a question. "Half dragon," Kyle confirmed. "Their mother was human, like you. But yes, they carry my blood. They will come into their full abilities when they are older." Sarah nodded slowly. She was processing, trying to make sense of a world that had suddenly expanded beyond anything she had imagined. "Why did you not tell me?" she asked. "Because I was afraid," Kyle said simply. "Afraid you would leave. Afraid you would take away the one good thing that has happened to my sons in 2 years." He paused, Afraid you would look at me the way you are looking at me now." Sarah realized she was staring. She made herself look away, then look back. "How am I looking at you? Like I am a monster." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she stepped closer to him, close enough to touch. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to his scaled hand. Kyle looked startled. "You want to touch me? After what I just told you?" "I want to understand," Sarah said. "I want to know who I married." Slowly, carefully. Kyle extended his clawed hand. Sarah took it in both of hers. The scales were warm, smooth, not slimy or rough like she might have expected. They felt like soft leather, heated from within. She turned his hand over, examining it. The claws were sharp, but not threatening. The golden color was beautiful in the blue firelight. "You are not a monster," she said quietly. "You are different. That is not the same thing." Kyle made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been a sob. "Most humans would disagree," he said. "Most humans have not been where I have been." Sarah looked up at him. "I have been abandoned, betrayed, left to die in the cold. The only monsters I have met have been human. You saved me. You gave me a home. You trusted me with your children." She squeezed his hand. "That is what matters to me." Kyle stared at her. In the flickering light, she could see tears gathering in his golden eyes. "How are you real?" he whispered. "I could ask you the same thing." Sarah smiled slightly. "I married a dragon. I'm not sure which of us is more surprised." Kyle laughed, a real laugh, full and warm, that echoed through the cavern. "I think I might be falling in love with you," he said. The words hung in the air between them. Sarah felt her heart skip. "I thought this was not supposed to be about love," she said carefully. "It was not." Kyle agreed. "But you have a habit of making me break my own rules." Sarah did not know how to respond, so she did the only thing that felt right. She stepped closer, rose up on her toes, and kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, hesitant, the kind of kiss that asked permission rather than demanded. Kyle froze for just a moment. Then his arms came around her, pulling her closer, and he kissed her back. The warmth of him surrounded her, the strange, wonderful heat of a dragon in human form, burning with a fire that did not hurt, only comforted. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I think," Sarah said, "that our arrangement might need to be renegotiated." "I think," Kyle said, "that you might be right." And in the heart of the dragon's lair, surrounded by ancient carvings and blue fire, two very different creatures began to discover that love did not care about boundaries, or rules, or expectations. Love just happened. Whether you were human, or dragon, or something in between. The days that followed were different. Better. The careful distance between. Sarah and Kyle began to close, replaced by something warmer, more intimate. They were still finding their way, still learning each other, but the wall between them had crumbled. Sarah moved into Kyle's room, not because she felt obligated, but because she wanted to. Because the thought of sleeping alone when she could be wrapped in dragonfire warmth seemed absurd. Morgana noticed the change. "Immediately, so you have ensnared him completely," she said one morning, finding Sarah in the breakfast room. "Congratulations, I did not think a human capable of such cunning." Sarah set down her tea. "I have not ensnared anyone. Your brother and I have simply found something we were not expecting. Love." Morgana said the word like it was poison. A human emotion, temporary, destructive. "You will hurt him in the end. You will hurt those children, Humans always do. Sarah stood up. She had been patient with Morgana, understanding, even, but she was tired of being dismissed. "I have done nothing but try to help this family," she said. "I have loved those boys when everyone else gave up on them. I have supported your brother when he needed someone to lean on, and I have endured your contempt without complaint, but I will not be called a threat to the people I love." "You love them," Morgana's voice was mocking. "For now, until something better comes along, until you remember that you are mortal and they will outlive you by centuries, until the novelty wears off and you realize what you have trapped yourself in." "I am not trapped," Sarah said firmly. "I am home." Morgana stared at her for a long moment. Something flickered in her icy blue eyes. Surprise, maybe, or the first crack in her armor of hostility. "We shall see," she said finally. And she swept out of the room without another word. But if Sarah thought Morgana was her biggest problem, she was wrong. A week later, a visitor arrived at Dragonheart Manor. Her name was Celine, Dragonessa Celine, as she insisted on being called. She was beautiful, in the way that ice sculptures were beautiful, perfect, cold, and utterly without warmth. "Kyle, darling." She swept into the entrance hall like she owned it, ignoring Sarah entirely. "I heard the most disturbing rumor, and I simply had to come see for myself. Celine." Kyle's voice was carefully neutral. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" Celine laughed, a brittle, tinkling sound. "What are you doing married to a human servant? Has grief finally driven you mad?" Sarah felt herself go rigid. Servant. The word cut deeper than it should have. "My wife is standing right beside me," Kyle said. His hand found Sarah's and squeezed. "Perhaps you could show her some respect." Celine's eyes finally landed on Sarah. They swept over her from head to toe, cataloguing every flaw, every imperfection. "This is her," Celine said. "This is what you chose over me. I did not choose anything over you." Kyle said, "We were never together." "Celine, our families discussed an arrangement. I declined. You declined because you were mourning." Celine stepped closer to him, completely ignoring Sarah. "But that was 2 years ago. Surely you have recovered by now. Surely you can see that a union between our houses would be far more appropriate than this." "This has a name," Sarah said, "and this is not going anywhere." Celine turned to look at her with undisguised contempt. "You think you can keep him? A human? You cannot give him what he needs. You cannot give him children who will carry on his line. You are temporary, at best." "Actually," Sarah said, "she can." Everyone turned to look at her. Even Kyle looked surprised. "I am pregnant," Sarah said. She had not planned to announce it this way. She had been waiting for the right moment, wanting it to be special, but Celine had forced her hand. Kyle's face transformed. Joy and shock and wonder all mingled together. "Pregnant?" He breathed. "You are certain?" "I saw the healer yesterday," Sarah confirmed. She smiled at him, ignoring Celine entirely. "We are going to have a baby." Kyle pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, his face buried in her hair. "A baby," he whispered. "Sarah, my Sarah." Behind them, Celine made a sound of disgust. "A half-breed." She spat, as if the twins were not enough. "You are polluting your bloodline. Kyle, Your ancestors would be ashamed." Kyle raised his head, and when he looked at Celine, there was fire in his eyes, literally. Sarah could see flames dancing in those golden depths. "Get out," he said quietly, "and do not come back." "You cannot dismiss me like some common servant," Celine said. "My family." "Your family can file a formal complaint if they wish." Kyle's voice was ice. "But you are no longer welcome in my home. You have insulted my wife. You have insulted my children. And you have shown yourself to be exactly the kind of person I have always known you to be. Leave. Now." Celine's face contorted with rage. But there was nothing she could do. Not against a dragon king in his own territory. "You will regret this," she hissed. "Both of you." And she stormed out, slamming the door behind her with enough force to shake the walls. Kyle turned back to Sarah, his expression softening immediately. "I am sorry," he said. "I never should have let her speak to you that way." "You stopped her," Sarah said. "That is what matters." But Kyle was already shaking his head. "No, I should have done it sooner. I should have made it clear years ago that there would never be anything between us." He touched her face gently. "You are my wife, Sarah, my queen, the mother of my children. No one speaks to you that way. Ever." Sarah leaned into his touch. "I can handle mean words, Kyle. I have heard worse. You should not have to." There was fierce protectiveness in his voice. "You are not a servant anymore. You are Lady Dragonheart, and anyone who forgets that will answer to me." Sarah smiled. She rose on her toes and kissed him softly. "My protector," she murmured against his lips. "Always." He promised, always. But Celine was not finished. Over the following weeks, small problems began to appear at Dragonheart Manor. Nothing major, nothing that could be traced back to any particular source, but enough to be troubling. Deliveries went missing. Important documents were misplaced. A valued servant suddenly quit without notice, citing a better opportunity elsewhere. And then there were the rumors. Sarah first heard about them from the cook, a kind woman named Mrs. Brennan, who had warmed to Sarah faster than most of the staff. "I thought you should know," Mrs. Brennan said quietly, pulling Sarah aside in the kitchen. "There is talk in the dragon community about you." "What kind of talk?" Mrs. Brennan looked uncomfortable. "That you bewitched the master, that you are using human magic to control him, that the children are being kept from their own kind because of you." Sarah felt cold. "That is ridiculous." "Of course it is." Mrs. Brennan patted her hand. "Anyone who knows you knows that. But not everyone knows you, my lady. And there are those who would rather believe a lie than accept the truth." Sarah thought about Celine, about her promise to make them regret dismissing her. "Do you know who is spreading these rumors?" Mrs. Brennan hesitated. "I cannot say for certain. But the Lady Selena has been seen visiting many noble dragon families since her departure, and her tongue has always been her sharpest weapon." Sarah nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me." She did not tell Cale about the rumors. He had enough to worry about, with territorial disputes and political maneuvering, and all the responsibilities that came with being a dragon king. She would handle this herself. But she kept her eyes open, and she started paying attention to things she might have missed before. The way certain servants avoided her gaze, the way conversations stopped when she entered a room, the way some of the dragon nobles who visited looked at her with barely concealed disdain. She was an outsider here, a human in a dragon's world. And no matter how much Kyle loved her, no matter how much the boys adored her, there would always be those who saw her as an intruder. But Sarah had faced prejudice before. She had survived worse than whispered rumors and cold shoulders. She would survive this too. The real crisis came 2 months later. Sarah was in the garden with the boys, enjoying a rare warm day in early spring. Her pregnancy was showing now, a small but visible bump beneath her dress. Lucas kept touching her belly, fascinated by the idea of a baby brother or sister. "Can I feel the baby kick?" he asked for the 100th time. "The baby is too small to kick yet, honey," Sarah explained patiently. "But soon, I promise." Ethan was sitting nearby, drawing in the dirt with a twig. He was still quiet, still selective about when he spoke, but the heavy silence of grief had lifted from him. He smiled now. He laughed. He was healing. "Sarah," he said suddenly, "someone is watching." Sarah looked up. There, at the edge of the garden, stood Bethany. "How did you get in here?" Sarah demanded, rising to her feet and putting herself between Bethany and the children. "The staff let me in," Bethany said sweetly. "I told them I was here to apologize, to make amends." She stepped closer. "They are such trusting creatures. Humans." "Stay back." Sarah's voice was hard. "You are not welcome here. I'm not here to cause trouble." Bethany held up her hands innocently. "I just wanted to see the children, their future king's heirs. Surely a concerned citizen is allowed to check on the well-being of the royal princes." Lucas pressed against Sarah's side. "I do not like her," he whispered. "She smells like smoke and lies." "How perceptive," Bethany murmured. "Half-breeds, but they have their father's instincts." She looked at Ethan, who had stopped drawing and was watching her with wary golden eyes. "This one does not speak, I am told. Broken. Defective. Such a shame." Sarah saw red. "Do not," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "Speak about my son that way." "Your son," Bethany laughed. "He is not your son. He is not your anything. You are just a human who got lucky. A placeholder until someone better comes along." Sarah stepped forward. She was smaller than Bethany, weaker, human, but she was also a mom defending her children, and that gave her a strength that had nothing to do with physical power. "Listen to me very carefully," Sarah said. "I do not care what you think of me. I do not care what rumors you spread, or what schemes you concoct. But if you ever come near these children again, if you ever say another cruel word to them, I will make you regret it." Bethany's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me? A human threatening a dragoness?" "I am promising you," Sarah said. "These are my sons, my family, and I will protect them with everything I have." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The tension crackled between them like electricity. Then Bethany smiled, that cold, cruel smile that Sarah had come to hate. "We shall see," she said softly. "We shall see what a human's protection is worth." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the house as silently as she had arrived. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding. Then she felt small hands grab hers. "You called us your sons," Lucas said quietly. His golden eyes were shining. Sarah looked down at him, then at Ethan, who had come to stand on her other side. "You are my sons," she said. "Both of you. No matter what anyone says, no matter what happens, you are mine. And I am yours." "Forever," Ethan whispered. "Forever," Sarah promised. And ever and ever? That night. She told Kyle everything. He listened in silence, his face growing darker with each word. By the time she finished, smoke was literally curling from his nostrils. "She came onto my property," he said, his voice barely controlled. "She threatened my wife. She insulted my children. She did not threaten." "Exactly," Sarah said carefully. "But her intentions were clear. Her intentions have always been clear." Kyle was pacing now, his movements sharp and predatory. "She wants what she has always wanted: power, position, and she believes the way to get it is through me. What are you going to do?" Kyle stopped pacing. He looked at Sarah, and the rage in his eyes softened. "Whatever is necessary to protect my family," he said. "But first, I need to know what you want." "What I want? This is your home, too, Sarah. Your children, your future." Kyle crossed to her and took her hands. "I will not make decisions that affect you without asking how you feel about them." Sarah considered. She thought about Bethany, about the malice in her eyes, about the threat implicit in every word she had spoken. "I want her to understand that she cannot hurt us," Sarah said finally. "I want her to know that we are stronger than her schemes, and I want her to leave us alone." Kyle nodded. "Then that is what will happen." The confrontation came sooner than expected, 3 days later. Morgana arrived at the manor with news. Bethany had filed a formal challenge. "A challenge?" Sarah asked. "What does that mean?" "In dragon society," as Kyle explained, "disputes can be settled through formal challenge. Combat, a test of strength to determine who is worthy of what they claim." "She wants to fight you?" "Not me." Kyle's jaw tightened. "You." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Me? But I am human. I cannot fight a dragon." "Exactly." Morgana's voice was grim. "That is why she chose this method. If you refuse the challenge, you forfeit your claim to Kale and the children. You would have to leave. But if you accept—" "She will kill me," Sarah finished, "almost certainly." Silence fell over the room. Sarah felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. After everything she had overcome, everything she had built, was it going to end like this? "I will refuse on your behalf," Kyle said. "I will claim spousal protection." "And everyone will say you are weak," Morgana countered. "That you cannot let your human wife face the consequences of her position. It will undermine your authority. It could lead to more challenges, more conflicts." "I do not care," Kyle growled. "I will not let Sarah die for the sake of politics." "There is another way," Sarah said quietly. Both dragons turned to look at her. "She is challenging me because she thinks I am weak," Sarah continued. "Because she believes a human cannot stand against her. What if I prove her wrong?" "Sarah, you cannot seriously be considering—" "I'm not going to fight her myself," Sarah interrupted. "But I am not going to run either." She looked at Morgana. "In dragon law, can I choose a champion? Someone to fight in my place?" Morgana's eyes widened slightly. "Yes, a challenged party can name a champion, but who would fight for a human against one of their own kind?" "I would," Kyle said immediately. "No." Sarah shook her head. "You cannot. You are too close to this. If you fight and kill Bethany, her family will demand retribution. It could start a war." "She is right," Morgana said reluctantly. "A king cannot fight his own wife's battle. It sets a dangerous precedent." "Then who?" Kyle demanded. "Who would be willing to stand for Sarah?" Morgana was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she straightened her spine. "I would," she said. Everyone stared at her. "You?" Sarah could not hide her surprise. You've made it clear you don't approve of me. Why would you fight for me?" Morgana's expression was unreadable. "Because you're not what I expected. Because you've loved those boys when I thought no one could reach them. Because you've made my brother happy in a way I didn't think possible." She paused. "And because I'm tired of Selena's scheming. She gives dragon ladies a bad name." "You would really do this?" Kyle asked. "For her? For our family." Morgana looked at Sarah directly. "I haven't been kind to you, Lady Dragonheart. I've been suspicious, hostile, unwelcoming, but you've proven yourself. You belong here, and it's time I acted like it." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She had not expected this. Not from Morgana. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll name me your champion," Morgana replied. "And I'll make sure Selene never threatens this family again." The challenge took place 1 week later. Sarah watched from the stands, surrounded by dragons who had come to witness the spectacle. She was terrified, not for herself, but for Morgana, who was walking into a fight because of her. Kyle sat beside her, his hand tight on hers. "Morgana is one of the finest warriors in the dragon realm," he said quietly. "She's fought dozens of challenges and never lost. But Selene is younger, faster, more reckless." Kyle's jaw tightened. "But she lacks discipline, and Morgana knows how to exploit weakness." The two dragon ladies faced each other in the arena below. Both had shifted to full dragon form. Morgana was silver and blue, elegant and deadly. Selene was red and gold, all fire and fury. The signal was given, and the fight began. It was brutal, fast, terrifying. Sarah had never seen dragons fight before, and she hoped she would never have to again. Flames scorched the stone walls. Claws clashed against scales. Wings beat the air with thunder-like force. At first, Selene seemed to have the advantage. She was aggressive, relentless, pressing Morgana back with wave after wave of attacks. But as the fight continued, Sarah began to see what Kyle had meant. Selene was powerful, but she was not controlled. She wasted energy on showy attacks that missed their mark. She left openings that a more experienced fighter would never allow. And Morgana exploited every single one. The turning point came 10 minutes into the battle. Selene lunged for Morgana's throat, overextending herself in her eagerness for the kill. Morgana dodged, spun, and caught Selene's wing wit.